The cop pointed at me, laughing so loud the whole school turned to watch, because I stuttered on the word justice. But what he did not know was that the kid he humiliated in front of everyone would soon be the one to take him down in front of the whole city. On that day, he laughed, not a chuckle, not a nervous giggle, but a full, open-mouthed, hand on his gun kind of laugh. The kind that echoes even after the sound has stopped, the kind that burns into your skin, that drills into your skull and stays there. He was wearing that same badge, that same stiff navy uniform with the shiny metal nameplate Dale, like he always did when patrolling our school's front gate during events. He pointed at me as I tried to speak, stumbling on the C in constitutional rights, and laughed like I was some circus act trying to recite Shakespeare. Kids in the crowd looked at each other, unsure if they should laugh too. I saw one girl cover her mouth, another whisper to her friend, and me. I stood there frozen, fists clenched tight, sweat trailing down my neck like the words I could not push out fast enough. Behind him stood Principal Winters tall, pale, red lipstick on her teeth, arms crossed tight like a judge at a beauty pageant. She did not laugh, but the look in her eyes said everything. Embarrassing. I wanted to vanish, to curl into the grass beneath my feet, to rip my own voice from my throat and throw it into the street, so no one could ever hear it stammer again. But I did not. I stood there, humiliated, my breath hitching, jaw trembling, and behind me, somewhere in the crowd, I heard the soft click of a phone recording. I knew who it was. My mother. She always recorded when she sensed danger, because we were black, because we were poor, because we lived in a town where our truth needed proof. My name is Marcus J. Freeman. I am 16 years old. I have a speech impediment, and I just got laughed at by a cop for trying to read the First Amendment aloud in front of my school. It was not supposed to be a protest. It was not even an official speech. I was standing near the school gates with my homemade poster that read, "Free speech is not a privilege," and I would written a short statement I planned to read if anyone asked what I meant. I was nervous, but I had practiced in the mirror 100 times. Every syllable, every breath. I thought I was ready. Then Officer Dale showed up. Sunglasses on, arms folded like a wall. He scanned the sign, scanned me, then barked, "You think this is cute?" I told him I was expressing my constitutional rights. That was my mistake. I stuttered. He laughed, and I broke. But here's what he did not know, what no one knew. I have been breaking my whole life. I broke the first time a teacher rolled her eyes and skipped me during read-alouds. I broke when my childhood therapist told my mother, "He will probably never be a strong speaker." I broke when a group of boys in 7th grade mimicked my voice behind me for a week straight until I stopped raising my hand altogether. Every time someone looked at me and saw a limitation, I cracked a little more until I stopped speaking at all. But I also listened. I listened to court trials on YouTube. I listened to speeches by lawyers, watched congressional hearings, memorized the Bill of Rights like scripture. I studied body language. I watched how great orators paused, how they redirected attention, how they owned silence. While the world dismissed me, I was learning how to fight not with fists, but with law, not with screams, but with evidence. And even though my voice sometimes stumbled over itself, the fire behind it never flickered. That moment, that laugh, that humiliation, it was the final crack. But sometimes when something shatters, what is left behind is sharper, stronger. After the crowd dispersed and the laughter faded, I walked straight home. I did not cry. I did not speak. I opened my door, went into my room, and pulled out my old black and white composition notebook. On the first page I wrote in block letters, "Exhibit abuse of authority." Then I scribbled under it, date, time, location, witnesses. My mother knocked lightly on the door. She stepped inside, still holding the phone. "I got everything," she said. Her voice trembled with rage. Every second, every word. I looked at her. This was the woman who raised me on library cards and food stamps, who spent nights holding my shoulders while I tried to pronounce justice without choking. "I am going to file something," I said. I paused. Not a complaint. A case. She did not tell me to calm down. She did not tell me to be careful. She just nodded and whispered, "Then let us do it right." And so it began, the most important case I would ever take on, one I was not officially qualified for, one I would never get paid to fight, but one I had to win. Because I was not just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every kid who'd been laughed at instead of heard, every voice shaken into silence, every sentence that got stuck but deserved to be spoken. And the next time I stood before that school or any institution of power, I would stutter if I had to. I would tremble if it came. But I would speak, because the truth does not need to be perfect to be powerful. And neither did I. My name has always come with a pause. Marcus. I used to hate introducing myself. People would lean in, pretend they did not hear it, or worse, repeat it back with a smirk, like it was a joke. I remember being 5 and standing in front of a circle rug in kindergarten, holding a foam letter M during alphabet day. I could not get the word out. Mem. The kids laughed as Kelsey smiled and said, "It is okay, sweetie. Some of us are just shy." But I was not shy. I was scared. By middle school, the fear was a suit I wore every day. I kept my head low. Never volunteered. Never made eye contact during oral presentations. My teachers said I was sweet but quiet. The counselor said I had a soft spirit. They all meant well, but none of them really saw me. Because when I was alone, I was loud. I would close my bedroom door, pull out my granddad's old tape recorder, and recite opening statements I would memorized from courtroom shows. I would pace like a lawyer, point like a prosecutor, whisper like a defender leaning into truth. Sometimes I would still stutter, but in that space, it did not matter. There was no laughter, no Officer Dale leaning back with arms folded. Just me, practicing the voice I wanted the world to hear someday. People always assume kids like me are weak, that because I hesitate when I speak. I must hesitate in everything. That because I am not smooth, I am not smart, but I was top of my class in civics. I knew the difference between civil rights and civil liberties before most of my teachers did. I had dreams that were not just dreams, they were blueprints. I wanted to be a lawyer, not because of the money, not because of prestige, but because the law, unlike people, has to listen. You say the right words in the right order, And it does not matter if your voice cracks or stutters, the courtroom still has to respond. My mom knew this dream. She did not always understand it, but she respected it. After my dad left somewhere between my first speech therapy session and his fourth failed job, she became the definition of persistence. She worked the overnight cleaning shift at the county hospital, came home to cook breakfast for me and my little sister, Alina, then slept 3 hours before walking us to school. And still, every Saturday, she took me to the public library so I could check out law books and study case files like they were comic books. It was on one of those Saturdays I first read about Gideon V. Wainwright, a man too poor to afford a lawyer, forced to defend himself, and he lost. But he did not stop. He wrote an appeal from his prison cell. Handwritten, messy, imperfect, but the Supreme Court heard him anyway and changed everything. That case became a tattoo on my soul. If they could listen to a man with no lawyer, no education, and no voice in the system, why not a 16-year-old stutterer from East Cleveland? Still, I knew the world would not hand me a podium. I had to build it. So I studied. I read the Constitution like scripture. I wrote flashcards for every amendment, every landmark decision. I recorded myself reading the Miranda rights until I could say them backward. My room looked like a mini courtroom. Posters of Thurgood Marshall and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, besides stacks of law textbooks my mom found at thrift stores. I even had a gavel I carved from an old chair leg. Every night after homework, I would practice giving a closing argument, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, even though my jury was just a row of teddy bears on my windowsill. But none of that mattered in public. In the hallways of Roosevelt High, I was just that kid who stutters. That is what they whispered. That kid. Some were kind. Most were cruel. A few were confused about why I even bothered trying to speak up at all. You would make a great lawyer if they let you write everything. Someone once joked. It was not funny, but I laughed anyway, because if I did not, it would be broken me. Then came the school's Justice Week, a week where students were encouraged to express their thoughts on freedom, law, and equality. There were speeches, debates, poster contests. They said it was a safe space for civic voices. So I made my sign. Free speech is not a privilege. I wrote a 2-minute statement, practiced it for 2 weeks, word by word, breath by breath. When I stepped toward the front gate that morning, I was not trying to be a hero. I was not trying to make headlines. I just wanted to be heard, even if my words came out bent and broken, even if they took longer to land. But instead of applause, I got laughter from the person whose job was supposed to protect at the very right. Officer Dale. He did not just laugh. He humiliated. And the worst part was not that he did it. It was that no one stopped him. Not the teachers. Not Principal Winters. Not the other students. The world just kept spinning like nothing happened. Like I was not standing there cracked wide open. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slow above me. Alina was asleep on the floor in her sleeping bag. Mom was still at work. The house was quiet except for the noise in my chest. My hands gripped the edges of my sheets. For the first time, I did not feel like reading about someone else's trial. I wanted to start my own. And maybe I did not need to wait to grow up. Maybe I did not need a diploma or a fancy office to speak truth. Maybe what I had, my notebook, my voice, my pain, was enough to start something real. Because I was more than the stuttering kid. I was the kid who never stopped listening, and I would been listening to injustice for far too long. He wore power like a second skin. Officer Dale never needed to raise his voice. His presence alone was enough to freeze a hallway, silence a crowd, or make a kid lower his eyes. He stood over 6 feet tall, wide-shouldered, with a buzz cut that gleamed under sunlight, like the reflection off his polished boots. His uniform was always spotless, the creases so sharp they looked ironed by fire, and clipped to his belt, alongside the holster and baton, was a walkie-talkie that barely ever buzzed because no one dared make trouble on his watch. To most of the teachers and parents, Officer Dale was just doing his job, a trusted presence on school grounds, a symbol of order. But to kids like me, and especially kids who looked like me, he was a warning sign dressed in navy blue. Not protection, not safety, a boundary line, one you crossed only if you wanted your life to shift forever. Everyone knew his story, though no one said it aloud. Decorated officer, 12 years on the force, survived a hostage standoff, but behind the praise was another thread, one whispered through broken-hearted families and quiet news headlines. Misconduct allegations swept under the rug, excessive force cases dismissed for lack of evidence, body cam footage mysteriously unavailable. In neighborhoods like ours, that was not new. That was expected. Officer Dale had been reassigned to Roosevelt High 2 years ago, after what the papers called a complicated dispute at a nearby precinct. No charges, no questions, just a change of scenery and a shiny plaque at the front office. From day one, he operated like the school was his courtroom, and every student was a potential defendant. He did not just patrol, he loomed. He would stand at the gates, hands on hips, scanning the kids like metal detectors could not do the job. Bag too big, he stopped you. Hoodie up, he questioned you. Talking too loud, he made a note. And if you dared speak back, he would flash that smirk, the one that said, "Try me, see what happens." I remember watching him corner a sophomore last year, Jamal, because the boy wore a shirt that said "Stop killing us." Dale told him it was aggressive, told him he could incite panic. Jamal tried to explain. It was a peaceful message. Dale shrugged, called the principal, and had him suspended for defiance. The next day, Jamal's locker was empty. His desk, too. Transferred out, vanished like smoke. Dale did not yell. He did not swing. He did not have to. His power came from silence, from how quickly a student's story could disappear, how fast their voice could be dismissed as attitude, their pain reframed as threat, and that made him dangerous in a way no weapon could match. So when he laughed at me that morning, when he pointed it as I tripped over the C in Constitutional, I knew what it meant. It was not just about me. It was about everyone watching. It was a message. Even your best effort, even your most careful speech, even your knowledge and heart and honesty, none of it matters if I say it does not. And in that moment, the school became a courtroom, but not one of fairness or justice. This was Dale's courtroom. And in Dale's courtroom, I was not a student. I was a suspect. Principal Winters stood nearby, expression unreadable behind her crimson lipstick and tightly curled hair. She did not stop him. She did not say a word. She adjusted her pearl necklace, gave a tight-lipped smile to a nearby parent, and turned away. That silence. That was her verdict. Complicity masquerading as professionalism. I should be broken again. Should be crumbled. Should be gone home and buried myself under my comforter and sworn off speaking forever. That is what they expected. That is what they counted on. But they did not know what was already brewing inside me. Because while Dale treated the school like his courtroom, I had spent years building my own. My courtroom was not brick and mortar. It was in my mind, in my notebooks, in the back corners of my spiral binders filled with case law and annotated rights. I had a gavel made of resolve, a bench built from truth. And though my voice stuttered, my will never did, I started collecting. Witness names, times, locations, incidents. I documented everything. Not just what happened to me, but what I saw happen to others. A girl suspended for hugging her girlfriend in the hallway. A boy stopped and searched because his backpack was too full. A teacher written up after reporting Dale's hostility in a staff meeting. All of it. I created files. I drafted statements. I studied how to submit public records requests. I researched how students could represent themselves in school board meetings. I reached out to the local ACLU chapter, no answer yet. But I was not done. Every time I heard Dale's boots echo down the hallway, I reminded myself, this is not his courtroom. Not forever. Because there is one thing about power built on fear and silence. It only holds until someone dares to speak. And no matter how shaky my voice was, no matter how many letters I stumbled through, I was going to speak loud, clear, public. They thought I was just a stuttering kid. They did not realize I was a witness, a plaintiff, and soon, a prosecutor. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of afternoon where the sun barely blinked through gray clouds, and the air carried the soft hum of worn-out buzzes and sidewalk chatter. I had just finished class and was heading toward the community library when I heard the commotion near the park cross from our school. I heard her voice before I saw her, high-pitched, scared, broken. "Let me go," she cried. I ran. Across the street, past the metal gate, my backpack slammed against my spine with every step. But my body did not stop, not until I reached the sight that would burn into me forever. Officer Dale had Elena, my 8-year-old sister, by the wrist. She was crying. Snot and tears smudged her cheeks, and her tiny hand clutched a bag of sour candy she must be bought with the few coins Mom gave her that morning. He towered over her like a statue made of iron and judgment. His face was not angry. It was indifferent. Like dragging a child through a park was just another item on his daily checklist. She was stealing from the vending machine. He barked without looking at me. Caught her with no money in hand. "She has the money," I gasped, already pulling bills from my own pocket. She is 8. Man, Don T, raise your voice," he warned, tightening his grip. I stepped closer, ignoring the tremble in my knees. "She is my sister. Let go of her. Now." People were watching. A few parents. A teacher across the street. But no one moved. No one said a word. Because it was Dale. and Dale did not get questioned. "Officer," I said, forcing each syllable past the knot in my throat, "you are detaining a child for holding a candy bag she paid for." He glanced at me, only then realizing who I was. The speech kid. He muttered, "The speech kid. That is all I was to him. Not Marcus, not a brother, not a human being, just a label attached to a flaw." He dropped her wrist suddenly. As if she would burn him, Alina fell back onto the grass. Sobbing, I dropped beside her, pulled her into my arms. My chest rose with each shallow breath, fury mounting like a wave that refused to break. She trembled against me like a leaf caught in a storm. No apology. No explanation. Dale adjusted his belt, turned his back, and walked away like nothing happened. That was the moment. The moment everything changed. Not the laugh. Not the mockery at the school gate. Not the stares. It was this, watching a man sworn to protect, humiliate, and terrify a child. My child. Because let us be real, in our world, siblings raise each other. I was not just her brother. I was her shield, her proof that kindness still lived in this cold world. And he had stripped her of that safety in seconds. I wanted to scream, to chase him, to demand justice right there. But I did not, because I knew the system. I knew what happens when black boys make noise in public. I knew how fast we go from victim to aggressor in the eyes of people like Dale. So I held her tighter, biting down so hard on my cheek I tasted blood. That night, I did not sleep. I watched the footage. My mother had caught it again, always ready with her phone. Alina's screams. Dale's grip, my voice cracking. She is my sister. Every frame was proof. I downloaded it, backed it up on 3 drives, uploaded it to a cloud. I was not losing this. And then I wrote. I did not write a diary entry. I wrote a declaration, a statement of facts. I wrote it like a case file. Victim: Alina Freeman. Age: 8. Location: Houff Park. Date: March 14th. Perpetrator: Officer Richard Dale. I included timestamps. Witnesses: emotionally disturbed minor status. 4th Amendment violation. And then I wrote the line that would stay with me for weeks. This is no longer about a laugh. This is about a pattern of abuse, unchallenged and systemic, committed against children too small to understand and voices too unsteady to shout. I shared it, first to my best friend, Caleb, then to the ACLU inbox, then to the local youth rights organization. My hands shook as I pressed send, but it felt like armor, like every word I wrote protected my sister from being erased. Mom read the letter. Didn't he say much? Just kissed my forehead and whispered, "You are becoming who you were born to be." But I was not sure who that was anymore. Some days, I still felt like the broken-voiced kid whose words tripped on their own feet. Other days, I felt like a soldier armed with syntax and citation. But all I really knew was this: they could laugh at me, they could silence me, but they would not touch my sister again, not without a fight. Because the system that let Dale walk away without a single consequence after grabbing a child in public, that system needed to be dragged into the light. And maybe my voice was not smooth, but I knew it could still roar. even if it shook the night's blood into each other after that. Sleep became a guest who never knocked anymore. I lay in bed with a highlighter clenched between my fingers and the faint hum of an old desk lamp flickering like it could give out at any second. On the wall beside my bed were taped up copies of the Constitution, the Civil Rights Act, and printouts from the Department of Education SES, Student Protection Policies. Some pages were crumpled at the corners from how many times I would reread them. Others had entire sections underlined, circled, or rewritten in block letters. I was not just reading anymore. I was preparing. My courtroom was not in a building. It was inside me now. I began my own nightly ritual. Press play on Grandpa's ancient tape recorder. Stand in front of the mirror and recite the same sentence over and over. Your Honor, my client has been unlawfully detained under color of authority. I did not care if I stuttered. I did not care if I tripped over authority for the 20th time. I said it again and again until I could say it with my eyes closed and my fists unclenched. Because I was not just practicing for a speech, I was building a weapon out of my voice. Every word became a blade. Every pause, a breath pulled back before the strike. Mom would peek through the cracked door sometimes, the exhaustion carved deep into her face like an ancient sculpture. But she did not stop me. She did not tell me to go to sleep. She just whispered, "Keep going," before returning to her late shift at the hospital laundry unit. I started collecting more than legal codes. I dug through old news stories, ones our community forgot. Articles about Officer Dale's alleged misconduct from 2 precincts ago. A case where a boy was pushed against a locker so hard he had to get stitches. Another where a Latina student was pulled from her class because Dale did not like the look she gave him. All resolved internally. All forgotten in a sea of bureaucracy and privilege. But I was not forgetting. I created a binder, labeled it Case Freeman v. Dale. Inside, I wrote down every interaction I would seen, heard, or lived through involving him. Each was dated. Cross-referenced. I added screenshots of text messages, accounts from classmates, even blurry videos passed around through group chats. I did not care if it was not admissible in court yet. It was admissible in truth. And that is where I intended to start. I could not take him to a real court. Not yet. But I could take him to the court of public opinion. I could take him to the school board, to City Hall, to every table where silence had been bought and placed like a trophy. And I would not do it alone. I started quietly talking to other students. In the back of the library, on the edge of the bleachers, kids who never spoke up before now leaned in when I approached. They remembered how Dale pushed Jamar's books onto the floor, laughed when a girl asked to wear a headscarf during PE, refused to let kids sit on the grass unless they were actively eating. It was not just abuse. It was humiliation by inches, death by dismissal. I met with Caleb every weekend. He helped me organize files, taught me how to encrypt drives, how to redact faces in photos to protect witnesses. We were building something, a document no one could ignore, a case that, even if it did not go to trial, would live on every desk of every leader too cowardly to look us in the eye. One night, after 3 straight hours of editing a witness statement from a 9th grader who was searched for loitering too confidently in the hallway, I leaned back and whispered, "Why does no one care until it is too late?" Caleb did not answer right away. He just typed the final period. turned off the monitor light, and said, "Maybe they do not care until someone refuses to be quiet." I stared at the ceiling for a long time after he left. That sentence pulsed in my chest like a second heartbeat. I refused to be quiet now. I printed every file I had, each one tucked into a manila folder, placed in a locked drawer in my desk, in a shoebox under my bed, and one given to my mom just in case. I knew the danger of what I was doing, but danger and justice always walk side by side. The only difference is whether you step in fear or purpose. Then came the call. It was a Friday evening when a number I did not recognize popped up on my phone. "Is this Marcus Freeman?" a woman asked. "Yes," I replied, my voice firm, this dragging a little longer than I liked. "This is attorney Lydia Harper, pro bono counsel with Youth Justice Network. We received your letter and we would like to meet." My hands shook, not from fear but from recognition. All those nights, all those recordings, all those words I forced out when no one else would listen. Someone finally did, and she had a law degree. We met that Sunday in the back of a church community room. She was a black woman in her early 30s, with braids pulled tight and a voice like smooth gravel. She read my files, all of them, page by page. And when she finished, she leaned back in the plastic chair, tapped the folder twice, and said, "Marcus, this is one of the strongest student-led compilations I have ever seen." My mouth opened. Nothing came out. She smiled. "Take your time." It was the first time an adult and expert looked at my stutter not as a flaw, but as a pause worth waiting through. We began planning. An official complaint to the school board. Petition to remove Officer Dale from campus pending investigation. A presentation at the open board meeting, which, she insisted, I would lead. I nodded, my chest clenched. My voice stammered when I asked, "You think they will listen?" Lydia looked at me with fire in her eyes. "If they do not, we will make them." That night, as I walked home beneath a blanket of quiet stars, I did not feel small. I felt steady. They thought I was just a kid with a speech impediment, but now I had a case file, a voice, a team, and a truth that refused to be silenced. And soon they would have no choice but to hear me. It felt like the entire school district had been scrubbed clean for that night. The board meeting was held in the Roosevelt High Auditorium, a room usually reserved for school plays and PTA announcements. But that evening, the folding chairs were rearranged, the stage transformed into a tribunal bench, and the spotlights above glared down like interrogation lamps. Rows of staff, parents, students, and news reporters filled the seats until the fire marshal had to ask latecomers to wait outside. This was not just a school event anymore. This was public reckoning. At the front, beneath the banner reading Cleveland Unified School Board, for the community, by the community, sat the 5 board members. 3 white, 2 black, all dressed in stiff professionalism and expressions that tried too hard to look neutral. They shuffled papers, checked microphones, glanced at one another, nervous, unprepared. They were not the only ones. I stood backstage, my palms drenched in sweat, heart pounding like it wanted to escape my ribcage. The thick folder Lydia and I prepared was clutched to my chest. Evidence, affidavits, timestamps, Photographs, transcripts, all of it arranged, rehearsed, documented. Caleb was beside me, nodding slowly, like a metronome keeping me steady. My mom stood a few feet behind, holding Alina's hand. She did not say a word, just looked at me like she was already proud, no matter what came next. And Lydia stood just outside the curtain, arms crossed, eyes focused like she was already cross-examining the entire room. When my name was called, I froze. For half a second, the weight of it all every late night, every word I struggled to say, every time I was laughed at, ignored, reduced to the speech kid piled on top of me like bricks. But then I felt it, Alina's hand on my back. I looked down and met her eyes, no tears this time. Just belief. That was enough. I stepped out into the light. The room hushed. Microphones buzzed faintly. I walked slowly to the podium in the center aisle, my folder in one hand, my voice well. I did not know where it was yet, but I was going to find it. I opened with a breath, then another. Then, my name is M. Marcus Freeman. The first syllable shook. I saw a few heads tilt, saw lips begin to purse, as if ready to pity me. But I did not flinch. I am 16. A student. A witness. A victim. And a voice for those who see can speak here. Tonight, silence. Not the awkward kind, the kind that listens. And so I continued. I laid out every instance of misconduct committed by Officer Dale. The physical aggression, the racial profiling, the emotional abuse. I described the moment he grabbed my sister and accused her of theft without evidence. I presented the footage, the timestamps, the written testimony from other students who had once been too afraid to speak. I stumbled through words, but I never lost the meaning. I lost syllables, but never the truth. Every time I hesitated, I looked up. My eyes met Lydia's steady as stone. Then Caleb's mouth murmuring, "You got this." Then my mother is tearful but unshaken. And finally, Alina's. When I played the video of her crying in that park, the room inhaled as one. When I said, we are not threats, we are children, I saw one board member lower his eyes. When I ended with, and if this room has rules, be but no justice, then they are just noise. Even the air itself seemed to pause. I expected nothing. But then came the clap. Just one. From the back. Then two. Three. Then the room erupted. Not in chaos. In thunder. Applause that did not care how long it took me to speak. Applause that echoed off walls where silence had ruled for too long. Applause that cracked the frozen mask of power. Principal Winters looked stunned. The board shuffled in their seats. One member, as Jennings, a black woman with braids down her back, leaned forward and spoke directly into her mic. "Ma. Freeman. Thank you. We will now enter deliberation." I returned to my seat, legs trembling, breath shallow. Lydia reached over and whispered, "That was better than any lawyer I have trained." But I did not feel victorious. Not yet, because somewhere backstage, I knew Officer Dale was watching. Not in uniform tonight, but he was there. He did not speak. Didn't he defend himself? He did not need to, because he believed nothing would come of it. He still thought I was just a stuttering kid who happened to get lucky with a microphone. But he did not realize that kid now had the room's attention. And soon, he would have their verdict. The board reconvened 20 minutes later, but it felt like 20 years. I sat still in my chair, spine straight, hands clenched in my lap. Alina had fallen asleep against my mama's shoulder, exhausted from the weight of the day. Her tiny body curled like a comma in the middle of a sentence. We were still writing. Lydia sat 2 rows ahead, tapping her pen against her notebook. Calm but alert. Caleb bounced his knee nonstop beside me, whispering under his breath what he thought each board member might say. I was not listening. All I could hear was my heartbeat, loud and uneven, like the stutter that once ruled my every word. Then came the chairperson's voice. After reviewing the testimony and materials submitted, this board has reached a preliminary conclusion. Every breath in the room hit pause. Effective immediately, Officer Richard Dale will be placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation by the school district and the Department of Civil Oversight. In addition, the board will initiate a district-wide review of student safety protocols, with a specific focus on student rights, race-based misconduct, and emotional trauma caused by authority figures within our schools. No cheers. Just silence. The kind that confirms truth. The kind that settles deep into the ground like rain into soil. Then the clapping started again. Slower. Deeper. Wiser. I felt my mom's hand slide into mine. She squeezed. Hard. I turned to her, and for the first time in years, I saw her cry not from worry or exhaustion or helplessness, but from pride. But it was not over. As the meeting closed, the auditorium began to clear. News crews surged forward. Microphones. Flashbulbs. Hands reaching. I tried to back away, but Lydia leaned in, firm and quiet. This is your moment. Say one thing. I stepped forward, heart thudding again. My throat ached, my lips dry. But I opened them anyway. Oh, we do not need perfect voices, I said, trembling. We need be brave ones. That line made headlines. By the next morning, it was all over local news. Teen with speech impediment speaks truth to power and wins. 16-year-old sparks review of school policing policies. Small voice. Big justice. But not everyone was celebrating. The backlash came fast. Angry emails to the school board. Parents who called me a liar. Online trolls who mocked my stutter. Someone even spray-painted snitch on the fence behind our house. But I was not afraid, because when truth finally finds its footing, lies start to fall apart loudly. And that is exactly what happened. The very next week, one of the district staff anonymously leaked internal emails showing the school had received multiple complaints about Officer Dale over the years and ignored them. Lydia's team filed a motion to make them public. The board scrambled, legal teams panicked, and the city began to wake up. I testified again, this time at City Hall. Lydia sat beside me, but I read the full statement myself. No interruptions. No snickers. no laughter. It was not perfect, but it was powerful, because I was not alone anymore. Caleb spoke too. So did 3 other students who had never once dared to speak into a microphone. A sophomore girl with a burn scar on her cheek from an incident no one had believed. A senior boy who dropped out after Dale pinned him against a locker for talking too loud. A non-binary student who been followed home once by Dale's cruiser just for walking alone after 9. They all spoke. They all shook, but they all stood. Together, we were no longer victims. We were voices. The city council voted 6th to recommend removal of all disciplinary officers from school campuses until a full review could be conducted. They even launched a task force student led to help rebuild the relationship between youth and authority. And they named me co-chair. I accepted, not because I wanted power, because I knew what it felt like to be spoken over, spoken about, and never spoken to. The day Officer Dale was officially removed from his post, there was no ceremony, no press conference, no tearful resignation. He just left. One moment, his nameplate was still on the desk outside the school office. The next, it was gone. Past that desk on my way to class a week later. Alina walking beside me, holding a new copy of the Velveteen Rabbit. She would checked out from the library. She tugged my sleeve and asked, "Marcus, can I talk about what happened to? Like, can I tell my friends I am not scared anymore?" I smiled, knelt to her level, and nodded. "You can tell the whole world." Because now I understood. The power was not in how smooth our voices sounded. It was in our decision to use them anyway. They did not even try to defend him anymore. The badge that once gleamed under schoolyard sunlights had lost its shine. The silence that used to shield Officer Dale now crumbled beneath the weight of documentation, testimony, and exposure. He became less a symbol of safety, more a symbol of systemic rot held together for too long by fear, privilege, and bureaucracy. The first official blow came during a televised city council hearing. Lydia and I were in the gallery, sitting side by side beneath fluorescent lights as Councilwoman River read a 34-page report aloud. Officer Richard Dale, in his time at 3 separate school zones, has been the subject of 11 complaints ranging from verbal abuse to inappropriate detainment and of minors, 7 of which were never fully investigated. She paused, then looked up and added, "This is not a matter of one bad day. This is a matter of bad systems." I watched Dale from across the room. He was there, for the first time without a uniform. No badge, no belt, no smirk, just a pressed shirt too tight across his chest, and a lawyer who refused to make eye contact with anyone in the room. His face was still blank, but his shoulders sagged with a weight he was not used to carrying. Accountability. The cameras clicked. Flashes popped. The courtroom air was stiff with anticipation, like everyone knew history was being made quietly, steadily, and by a kid who once could not even say his own name without stuttering. Outside, reporters crowded me. One asked, "How does it feel seeing the man who mocked you finally face consequences?" I thought about it, then answered, "Justice does not feel like revenge. It feels like silence being replaced by truth. It was the most quoted line in the paper the next day. But the moment that changed everything came a week later at Roosevelt High itself. The school hosted its first ever youth civic forum, designed by our student-led task force, open to the public, hosted in the auditorium, where I first stammered through my truth. This time, the room looked different. Gone were the folded arms, the stiff suits, the walls that once muffled student voices. In their place were open notepads, listening ears, teachers in casual clothes, and students lining up to speak their minds into a microphone that no longer filtered for eloquence. Only sincerity. I sat on stage with the panel, Lydia beside me, Caleb down in the front row. Running tech. The final speaker was introduced by name. Alina Freeman. Gasps echoed. I felt my stomach lurch. She stepped out from behind the curtain, 8 years old, in her best yellow dress, her braids tied with matching bows. She clutched a piece of paper like it was made of glass, walked to the mic, stood on her toes. And then she read. She talked about fear, about how she could not sleep for weeks after being grabbed, about how for a long time she did not believe grown-ups could be wrong. But most of all, she talked about her big brother. My brother has a hard time talking sometimes, she said, but he never stopped trying. And that helped me be brave, too. So, now I am talking. There was not a dry eye in the house. Even I could not hold it in. I turned away and wiped my cheek as quickly as I could. She did not need to see me cry. Not today. Today was her day. The next day, Officer Dale resigned quietly. The department said it was a mutual decision. The board said it was time. But we knew what it really was. It was inevitable. His badge was gone. His desk was cleaned out. His name disappeared from the school security roster, like it had never been there. Just a memory. A uniform once wrapped around unchecked power, now folded in disgrace. No public apology. No acknowledgement. But we did not need it. Because, sometimes, the fall of a uniform is louder than any confession. In its place, something new began to grow. Teachers started listening more. The school introduced a restorative justice program. Students once too afraid to speak were now leading clubs. Campaigns. Even writing op-eds in the local paper. Kids who used to sit in silence during assemblies now stood and told their stories. Some stuttered. Some cried. Some whispered. But they spoke. And when they did, no one laughed, because the culture had shifted. And part of that shift had my name on it. Marcus J. Freeman, the kid who once could not say constitutional without his voice collapsing. The kid who had been laughed at by a cop in front of his school. The kid who turned notebooks into evidence and pain into power. I still stuttered. I still paused. But now, when I spoke, rooms leaned in. Because I had proven what Dale never could. Authority is not built by volume. It is built by integrity. And I carried mine in every pause. Every breath, every sentence I fought to finish. The first time someone called me Attorney Freeman, I almost laughed. It happened during a youth legal clinic hosted at the community center. Lydia had pulled me into the program as a student facilitator, unofficial, unpaid, but full of responsibility. We helped local teens understand their rights, how to handle a stop and frisk, what to do if suspended unfairly, how to write a formal complaint. I was reviewing a mock affidavit for a 9th grader when she handed me her paper and said, "Here you go." Attorney Freeman. She was not mocking me. She said it like it was true. And in that moment it felt true, because by then I was not the same boy who froze in front of the school gates. I was not the shaky-voiced kid holding a cardboard sign. I was not even just the student who brought down an officer. I was a force. My binders had grown from 1 to 5. Each labeled, each updated weekly. I carried them everywhere my unofficial case files on student rights. District policy. Local ordinances. I led peer trainings during lunch breaks, held after-school Know Your Rights circles, and started a podcast called Still Speaking, where students submitted stories of being silenced, profiled, or dismissed, and I read them aloud. My voice still broke sometimes. I still stammered. But that did not stop people from listening. In fact, it made them listen more. I did not hide my impediment. I highlighted it, because every word I got through felt earned, and people respected that. Even teachers, even the principal, especially the kids who had their own quiet struggles, anxiety, trauma, dyslexia, grief. They came to me, not because I had answers, but because I would already asked the hard questions. Out loud. In public. Without shame. At home, Alina became my fiercest campaign manager. She printed flyers for our podcast, helped organize youth speakers, even started her own junior justice journal at school. She told her classmates about constitutional rights the way other kids talked about cartoons. She wanted to be like me. I wanted to be like her. One day, I walked past the mirror in the hallway and stopped. I saw a tall, lanky teen in a sweater 2 sizes too big, wearing headphones around his neck and holding a battered folder packed with typed documents. I did not see the stuttering kid. I saw a student advocate, a future lawyer, a change maker. But the world still had more to teach me. Late one evening, while researching a policy loophole around school detentions, Lydia called. "You have got an invitation," she said, voice buzzing with pride. "The Oyo Youth Civil Rights Summit. Keynote panel. They want you." I froze. "But me?" I asked. I am not even graduated." "They do not care about that," she said. "They care about what you built, what you survived, and what you refused to stay silent about." I said yes, of course I did. But the weight of it settled like gravity on my shoulders. That stage would be bigger than anything I would faced. Bigger than the school board, bigger than City Hall, a conference of leaders, organizers, students, lawyers, politicians. I was not just speaking to be heard anymore, I was speaking to lead. The night before the summit, I sat at my desk, staring at a blank sheet of paper. I knew what I wanted to say, but I did not know how to start. So I reached for the old tape recorder, the same one I would used for years, the one Grandpa left behind. I pressed record, and I began. "Dear Marcus," I said aloud, "this is for you. The you who stood on the school steps and froze. The you who was laughed at by the man with the badge. The you who wanted to disappear. I am still you. But now, I know this, your voice, no matter how slow, how broken, how bruised, is still a sword, and they can take it from you. You earned every vowel, every breath, every stammer. Keep going. You are not done. The next morning, I walked on stage. No curtain, no teleprompter, just a single mic and a hall full of eyes. I took one breath, and then another, and then I spoke. My name is Marcus J. Freeman. I stutter. I hesitate, but I do not back down. And the hall stood, all of them, not waiting for me to finish, not waiting for the perfect sentence, just standing because I had started. Because, sometimes, the most powerful statement is not flawless, it is fearless. Graduation day arrived beneath a sky so wide and blue it felt like the world itself had exhaled. The Roosevelt High football field was packed with rows of folding chairs, decorated mortarboards, and families waving paper fans against the June heat. The air smelled like sunscreen, fresh cut grass, and possibility. I stood behind the podium, fingers lightly touching the worn edge of my speech. My name was printed on the program under the words, Student Keynote Speaker, Marcus J. Freeman. The kid they once called that stuttering boy was now the final voice of the ceremony. The field was silent, not with judgment, but with respect. I took one breath long and steady. Then I looked out at the crowd and began. 4 years ago, I said, my voice trembled slightly. If you asked me to speak here, I would run. Polite laughter rippled. Not mockery. Understanding. I nodded and continued. Slower, but with strength behind every word. I was the boy who spoke with broken sounds. The one who froze in front of a mic. Who got laughed at by a police officer when I tried to read my rights. Heads turned. They knew that story. They remembered. But the thing is, I said, eyes locked with the rows of students in front of me. My voice did not get weaker when they laughed. It got stronger because I kept using it. I paused, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. To anyone who has ever been told your voice is too soft, your mouth too slow, your story too messy, remember this. You do not have to speak like them to speak for them. That line was met with silence. Not because it fell flat, but because it hit deep. I saw my mom in the third row, both hands clasped over her mouth, tears streaking down her cheeks. Alina sat beside her, clapping even before I was done. Lydia stood near the back, nodding, arms crossed with pride. Caleb recorded everything, holding up a homemade cardboard sign that read, "Let him finish." I smiled, the same smile I wore when I first finished reciting the Bill of Rights without a single pause. The same smile I wore when Officer Dale resigned. The same smile I wore when I finally stopped being afraid of my own voice. I still stutter. I said, proudly now. But now, I also speak, that earned a standing ovation. Every student, every teacher, even Principal Winters. And this time, there was no one laughing. After the ceremony, dozens of people came up to me. A student with autism who said he finally believed he could run for class president. A parent whose daughter had selective mutism and now wanted to join the school debate team. Even a former district official who whispered, "You changed the way we listen." But the moment that stayed with me came hours later. I was alone in my room, diploma on my desk, suit jacket draped over the chair. When I pulled out my old tape recorder one last time, I pressed play. The voice on the tape was younger, uncertain, a much smaller me, practicing a sentence over and over again. "My name is Marcus Freeman, and I believe in the Constitution." Stutter after stutter, pause after pause. But he never gave up. I smiled, tears sliding down without permission, and whispered, "You did it, kid. You really did." Because I had. I turned my stutter into strength, my silence into a statement, and my pain into purpose. I was not done. Of course, college was next, then law school, then courts where I would fight not just for myself, but for every voiceless kid who never got a chance to be heard. And maybe one day, I would walk into a courtroom, papers in hand, and someone would whisper, "That is Attorney Freeman." But I would still be Marcus. Still stuttering. Still speaking. Still standing. Because the truth is, let them laugh. We will speak anyway. Marcus Freeman did not win because he was the loudest. He did not win because his voice was flawless. He won because he refused to let silence be his sentence. Because even when the world laughed, dismissed, and doubted him, he kept showing up with a folder in his hands and a fire in his chest. His story teaches us something we too often forget, that bravery is not always loud, that justice does not require perfection, only persistence, that your voice, however it sounds, still matters, in a world quick to mock difference and slow to hear pain. Marcus reminded us all that you do not need to sound like everyone else to speak for something greater. He stuttered, he spoke, he stood, and by doing so, he opened the door for thousands more to do the same. Was there a time your voice was ignored, but you kept going anyway? Share your story in the comments. You never know who you will inspire. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like. Hit subscribe for more true stories that uplift and empower. And share it with someone who needs to hear. You do not have to speak perfectly to speak powerfully. Your voice is enough. Just like Marcus was